Hello, everyone. Welcome to IPWatchdog Unleashed, where each week we journey into the world of intellectual property to discuss the laws, news, policy, and politics of innovation, technology, and creativity. With analysis and commentary from industry thought leaders and newsmakers from around the world, IPWatchdog Unleashed is hosted by world-renowned patent attorney and the founder of IPWatchdog.com, Quinn, who has twice been named one of the most influential people in the intellectual property community and recognized numerous times as one of the top IP strategists in the world. Take it away, Gene.
Thanks, Renee, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this week on this edition of IP Watchdog Unleashed. This week we have a special guest with us, Gil Hyatt. Many of you know Gil, or at least many of you think you know Gil. Gil has been a prolific inventor for a very long time. He has numerous patents, numerous innovations. He's been fortunate enough to become, I think, a very wealthy man. I won't put any words in his mouth. We'll hear from him. Thought it would be interesting to sit down with Gil to talk about a variety of things, including his inventions, how he got into inventing in the first place, and then what he is continuing to work on, if believe it or not, still even today. So Gil, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Gene. Thank you for inviting me.
So we have a lot of ground I would like to cover if we can. So maybe we could dive right in and let's start from the beginning, because one of the things that I always find interesting, and I think these conversations are good for, is to get to know people and maybe get to know people in ways that we haven't got to know you before. I mean, people probably have a good idea of who you are, and or you've been involved in some high profile cases over the years, which we don't need to get into that so much. But my guess is, like many people like yourself who have achieved a certain level of success, people think they know who you are. But in my experience, most of the time, they don't really know who folks are. So I wanted to go all the way back to, and not pick a time so much as an event, I suppose. How and why did you get into inventing in the first place?
Well, I never really got into inventing. I'm an engineer, an electrical engineer, and I was gifted enough to be able to work in some of the most advanced areas during the Cold War at Hughes and North America and Teledyne, and got into some of the really advanced technologies there. Then I was uh, I had the need for a small, inexpensive computer, so I implemented the microcomputer and formed a company I called Microcomputer Inc., which was financed by venture capitalists in California. Um, we built microcomputers and sold numerical control systems. The company needed patents to get the venture capital. I got into working on patents. And then as the technologies evolved that I was working on, I filed patent applications on them. And the rest is history.
So I want to go, we went too fast through that history. And then what I should say is, just if people are interested in your story long form, Art Damerich, who's been on this podcast a couple times and had been with this Smithsonian institution for about a decade or so, did an oral history with you. And we can link that in the podcast article. I don't necessarily want to go as detailed as Art did in your history, but I do think it's interesting to talk about your decision to become an electrical engineer. What was behind that? And then where did you go to school? Those are two questions. So maybe we pick the first one. Why when you were in high school, learning at a young age in your teenage years, what provoked you to want to go down this path to become an electrical engineer?
I never made that decision. It was already made for me by the good Lord. And I always knew that's what I wanted to be or what I was destined to be. And I just followed the course that was laid out for me.
Okay. Where did you go and study?
I went to a University of California at Berkeley and got an electrical engineering degree. That was about 1959. Then got a master's degree from University of Southern California under a fellowship from Hughes Aircraft, where I was working at the time.
Mhm. And you're first generation American, correct? Do I have that right?
Oh, that's correct. My parents were immigrants, legal immigrants from more than 100 years ago. And the American dream was one of the gifts given to us.
So this idea of the American dream is real for you, I guess, in ways that probably it would not be for many Americans. And by that, I don't mean to say anything bad about many Americans. It probably didn't come across right. What I mean by that is what comes to mind is like, for example, director Andre Yanko, former director of the PTO. His family is from Romania. You know, when you have family who were outside the United States and then traveled at great expense and great distances and great effort to get here, I find that they appreciate things maybe a little bit more than people who were here for multiple generations. Don't want to put any words in your mouth, but just want to get your thoughts on what the American dream means to you personally as a first generation American. And maybe what did your American dream, to the extent that you know, mean to your mom and dad?
My family and my extended family and myself didn't take this for granted. We all appreciated it. I love America and I want to repay America for all that I do not take for granted and all that I've been given.
Mhm. And we're going to want to go more in depth in that, what you mean by repay America, because I know you've got a foundation that you are starting. We'll get there here in a minute, but before we get into that nitty gritty about, you know, paying it forward, I suppose, which is, as I understand, a mission of yours now at this point in your career. Tell us a little bit about some of your inventions, not maybe the ones you're working on here most currently, but what, looking back, are there one or two or three that really get you excited to talk about still today? And if so, why?
There's a whole bunch of technologies, and they're all integrated or linked together in some way or other through my mental process and through the patents that I received. The microcomputer was one of the first ones that was a single chip computer that has proliferated the world to this day. That was part of a whole bunch of others having to do with illumination control, image processing, signal processing, and a whole bunch of highly technical fields that were sort of wide open back in those days in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. I was fortunate enough to have innovations in a whole bunch of those areas and got a lot of patents on them. And a lot of companies licensed my patents. I would like to mention that with all the licenses that I have, I never had to file a notice of infringement or litigation on patents. All of the companies settled for fairly reasonable terms.
Mhm. It's interesting that you say that. You know, years ago, I had the opportunity to interview Gary Mickelson, who was the inventor behind minimally invasive back surgery. And then famously, Medtronic bought his portfolio. Now, this is, may even be 20 years ago, for $1.4 billion. He never sued anybody either. All the lawsuits that he was a part of were brought to him as declaratory judgments to try and invalidate his patents. He never went after anybody. And then I guess the other side's finally tired of not being able to challenge his patents, and he became a very wealthy man. And it sounds to me that that's your story as well. You've never really gone out, and I'll ask you to comment on this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it doesn't seem like you ever really went out litigating against people the way that probably most people in the industry think you did.
That's correct, except what happened was the multinational company Philips, NV Philips, were experts in patent licensing, and they worked up a program where they licensed my patents to multitudes of multinational companies like Sanyo and Schuster, which had Panasonic, and many of the camera companies and video game companies like Sony. And they were able to negotiate very favorable licenses. Most of those were foreign companies. So we were able to bring the licensing fees and the taxes into the American Treasury. So it was a win-win situation.
Yeah, and that's one of the shocking things, and I think because people just I get this sense that they think of you I'll give you an opportunity to address this. I mean, people think of you as a patent troll. But how can you be a patent troll if you weren't suing people? I mean, because today what we think of patent trolls is are these people they're suing dozens, if not hundreds of people all at the same time, sometimes literally on the same day. They're trying to settle with everybody, sometimes with claims that aren't all that great. Maybe you don't even seem to cover too much what the defendant is doing. And then that's a very different model than somebody who's invented and now is trying to license and put the invention into the stream of commerce so others can make money doing it. Those are different business models.
Very definitely. And that patent troll image and other things like that are character assassination that the adversaries were using to mischaracterize me.
Yeah. And I think it's probably always a mischaracterization when it is used because ironically, and I don't understand why this is so much, but it seems to me that the people who should be characterized as those bad actors, the nefarious characters, the ones that are suing, spending a few $100s to file a federal complaint, and then being willing to accept 5, 10, 15, $20,000 to settle. Well, that's just a shakedown. I mean, that's not a legitimate dispute. They're not really trying to license technology. So there are bad actors out there, but those are never the ones that people seem to complain about. They seem to complain about the people who have real technology that they just don't want to pay for because it's very valuable and they don't want to have to probably pay 100 cents on the dollar.
Yes, very definitely. And also because I had many cutting edge patents that were considered to be advances in the field, and the patent office had a secret program to suppress those and to prevent the patents from issuing on cutting edge inventions. So the patent office was and still is assassinating my character in order to keep from me getting patents that I still have pending.
I didn't know whether you were going to want to go there. And now that you're there, we can maybe spend a little bit of time there. And the reason is because I know you have some litigation that's still pending. It's my understanding that you have not received a patent since what, 1995, over 30 years. Is that true? Is that accurate?
That's pretty accurate. The patent office was issuing me a lot of patents in the pre-1997 timeframe. In 1997, they made a decision, no more patents for Hyatt, because I had some pioneering patent applications. And they had a secret program called SAWS, which is an acronym to prohibit pioneering patents from issuing. They delayed for several decades, and it's still going on.
And that's one of the unfortunate things. I know you have current litigation at the moment on the issue of latches. I won't ask you to comment on that. It just would not be appropriate to have you while the case is still ongoing. But I do think it's important that people hear the patent office hasn't issued you anything since 1997. That's almost 30 years ago. And so this issue of laches, whatever people think of laches, it's not just that it's taken a long time to get the patent. In a lot of cases, as you point out, the patent office just is refusing to issue patents. And based on the research we've done and the information I've been able to gather, probably for about 15 or 16 years at a minimum over the last generation, they've had an active program to essentially stall at least certain applications. And in the original saws that went on for about 14 or 15 years, one of the reasons that you could have got caught up into that was it was the technology the patent office thought that they wanted to use. I mean, so it wasn't just that these were important pioneering and they thought it was going to be maybe preemptive. It was real malice of forethought that went into a lot of that. And it's shocking. We broke this now probably 6 or 8 months ago. That program came back on some level in some way during the Biden administration. There was just a number of patents that were thrown into purgatory, never to come out, and that was ended by the Trump administration. And it's shocking that this can go on. And so when people think that, well, these applications have been pending for 30 years. Well, yeah, they've been pending for 30 years, but that's not your fault. Yeah, I mean, presumably you would accept a patent from the office if they offered you one, right?
I was trying very hard to get my patents issued as soon as possible. And Congress gave various rights under the GATT legislation to get patents issued quickly. But the Patent Office violated the GATT legislation and kept my patent applications pending up to this time. For example, they suspended my applications with over 2,000 suspensions. The 6 month suspensions. That's 1,000 years of delay by the Patent Office. And yet I was not permitted to testify that the Patent Office caused any delays. And therefore, here were 1,000 years of Patent Office delay, cumulative, that I was charged with when I was filing petitions to stop that and to get it moving, including an APA action.
Mhm.
The Patent Office was able to cause immense delays and then blame me for them.
Mhm.
And of course, my hands were tied because I was prevented from testifying.
Right. Well, and I don't want to go down this path too much more because I know that, as I mentioned, there's litigation going on, and I don't know what the order protects, but I also understand there's an order pending from a federal judge that prevents you from disclosing some information about the case as it's moving forward. So I want to be very mindful of that protective order that's in place. But maybe you could at least say this. A lot of this stuff, as I understand it, that we've been talking about back and forth and about saws that I know I've uncovered myself and that you've talked about the program. You've also had in that APA case some former high-ranking PTO people testify and explain what was really going on, and it doesn't really paint a very good picture of what was happening at the office. Is that fair to say?
That's correct. That was false information because my hands were tied and they were able to pick and choose specific events and disregard the major issues that caused the delay. For example, after my applications were pending and prosecuted and final actions and appeal briefs for 14 years, I believe it was, they reopened prosecution and started all over again. Well, I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to either get to the Board of Appeals or get them issued. They just kept reopening prosecution and generating office actions, and I had no choice but to follow their lead.
Just to wrap this up is where I started. There's a lot of people who probably think they know the Gilbert Hyatt saga. And I think, just realize there's probably a lot more to it than you've been led on to believe. And maybe in time, the fullness of the entire story will be told. I don't even know the fullness of the entire story myself, but what pieces I do know raises significant questions in my mind about what really was going on and why. And the real issue for me on the fairness level is simply that we don't know how many other Gilbert Hyatts are out there. How many other people were caught up in these programs and their applications not moved forward because the office is never given an accounting of the applications that have been stalled as a part of this program. And I just wonder how many other people who didn't have your resources and didn't have your fortitude to continue to challenge this year after year after year just gave up and didn't know any better. And we'll never know how many things wound up getting buried. And that to me is a tragedy.
We filed a class action suit against the Patent Office, and in discovery, most of it is protected, but some of it I've learned about individual inventors and researchers and such who have lost their patent applications either because the university couldn't get patents and therefore stopped the grants, or in one case, the individual this company went bankrupt because he couldn't get patents to get the investment capital necessary. So I believe that most of the victims were small entities that weren't able to do their rights. And that's why we're trying to get the secret documentation from the Patent Office with the class action suit against the SAWS program.
Yeah. Well, good luck to you on that. And I hope, sunshine is the best disinfectant. And I think it will, well, I shouldn't say I think it's going to come out. The older I get, the less hope I have at times. I hope it comes out one way or another as to what really happened. So let's pivot a little bit because I really don't want this just to become a gripe session about what has happened in the past. One of the things that I've come to learn, Gil, as I've gotten to know you a little bit as we've prepared to have this conversation, is something I didn't know about you in that you are an inventor in the artificial intelligence area. And it's my understanding that some of the patents that you still are waiting on are potentially pioneering patents in the AI space that could have implication for what's going on here today. A lot of companies might want to license them. A lot of companies might need to license them. And maybe even that these patents that are being held at the patent office pending whatever review the patent office is doing as they're doing it may also have direct or potential impact for the American economy and for what it is really that President Trump and the Trump administration want to do to assert US dominance in the AI area. So I'd like to move in that direction. Can you tell us, without releasing any confidential information, of course, what are your AI inventions relating to?
They are pioneering AI patent applications. Patent applications were filed in 1984 on my prior work. That was a long, long time ago. The Board of Appeals reversed all rejections on them, making them allowable. The courts have verified that they are allowable, and therefore, and so we're past that. They don't have any rejections or any latches issues against them. And they are in a foundation that we've created called the Pioneering AI Foundation, which we're waiting on the administration to make its final suggestions before we file the foundation. The patents at issue on the AI technologies and all of my other technologies will be assigned to the foundation, which is a nonprofit philanthropic foundation. It invokes a very special feature of the Congress's laws that permit us to help the administration with their trade negotiations because the International Trade Commission can issue exclusion orders. These are very broad laws and broad claims that hopefully could really benefit the administration and America.
There's a lot there to unpack. Let's try and maybe take it in order. For those who maybe are not steeped in AI, at least maybe they are familiar with using AI, but what is it that the inventions relate to?
They relate to AI in broad terms and to many applications of AI, including education, trade, and a whole bunch of other applications, uses of AI.
So are we talking about making the machine smarter, better training?
Yes, exactly. And it has to do with a lot of manufacturing aspects, AI used in manufacturing and in communications and in image processing and a whole bunch of other applications. One of the objectives of the foundation is to help with American trade. We plan on giving enormous reductions in licenses for products made in America and let the administration negotiate whether to admit or exclude products imported from foreign companies.
As I understand it, is the foundation has been created to own the IP that you get ultimately, or hopefully get ultimately, in these patents, and that there will be some kind of a mechanism for the foundation to license US companies, and give them the ability at very reasonable rates to use this technology, but then also to prevent other companies from other nationalities potentially from infringing the patents, and that you would get to go to the ITC in order to stop that from happening, which would then help those companies in the US who had licensed that technology. And that is what you've kind of thought could be a part of how America takes the lead, as President Trump wants to do, in AI dominance, as he calls it. Is that in a nutshell what we're talking about?
Yes, sort of, but I'd like to elaborate on it.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, this is not something that we plan to do. This is something that we have been doing for a couple of decades, and we've spent millions and millions of dollars developing it to this extent. And now we're offering it to America for essentially free of charge and to help make America great again.
You mentioned that you're waiting on some feedback from the administration. I presume you're talking about the Trump administration. You've been in contact with them, is that correct?
We've been working with the Trump administration for about a year now. It looks like we're coming to an important conclusion, hopefully. And it's primarily a matter of getting the final suggestions from the administration. We already have many, but getting the final suggestions from the administration so that we can file the foundation and to get things moving in that respect. And one thing that's very important that was in the news yesterday is that the administration is having problems with their tariffs at the court. This is a non tariff approach where Congress has legislated several laws that permit us to get exclusion orders at the International Trade Commission and exclude importing of products, and the administration can then use that to facilitate its trade agreements. And of course, we'll adjust the foundation and the license agreements to suit the administration's objectives in order to meet the philanthropic objectives.
This is what you were talking about at the very beginning when you were saying that you wanted to essentially, maybe I was my words, but pay it forward is how I characterized it. Is that what you were talking about then?
I want to repay America for the American dream for my family and myself, and to help make America great again.
Mhm.
And this is the best way that I can achieve that. And interesting enough, it comes up at America's 250 anniversary. And this is a great birthday present for America, I believe.
Mhm. Another aspect of this that the people who think they know you and they know what you're doing, you're talking about putting these patents, these valuable AI patents on technology that you started innovating back in the 1980s and had not, in large regard, had ever gotten to be able to patent for a variety of reasons that we've alluded to here into the hands of America, and you're giving them up and you're not going to be making any money on these patents. Is that what I'm hearing, right?
Yeah, I don't need any money. I'm still of the depression generation. I make do, a frugal person. My objective is not to make money. I don't even take a salary out of the foundation. It's a matter of giving America a 250-year birthday present.
Yeah, that's remarkable, and I know a little bit about how frugal you are. Do you wanna share what car you actually are driving these days?
Yes, I have a 1992 Toyota Celica, and I it gets me around just fine.
So, that's remarkable to me. I mean, that takes, being frugal to a different level. In my mind, it does. I mean, that's cars going on 35 years old. It's not like it would be one thing if you were driving around like a 50 or 60-year-old American muscle sports car that you had souped up and fixed up and would be worth several $100,000. But you're talking about driving around a car that just, is sort of no frills but never dies. And that to me is a little bit remarkable because you've done pretty well for yourself, right? That's fair to say.
Philips did a very successful licensing program and licensed a lot of multinational companies, and I was well rewarded. But I've put most of that money already into this project, which has culminated in the AI Foundation. And I plan on using the rest of it to a large degree to get the foundation started and to continue it after I'm not around.
Mhm. Yeah, it is remarkable. That's the only way I could describe it. You don't hear a lot of people doing that sort of thing. Maybe you hear people leaving gifts in their will, but you don't see a lot of people actually, while they're still around and they still have something that's valuable, giving it away for others to benefit from. And I think you ought to be commended for that. but I know you're a humble guy, and I know you're not gonna take a victory lap. So, I mean, I just appreciate that about you, and I almost don't know what to say. I hope it all works out. Do you know what the next steps are that we're waiting for?
In several areas for the administration to make its final suggestions so that we can get the foundation filed
Mhm.
and to then work out a strategy so that they can use rights at the International Trade Commission to facilitate their trade program.
Mhm.
And especially in view of the vulnerability at the Supreme Court of the tariff project.
Yeah, we today was the first day that the Supreme Court was potentially gonna release decisions. This was not released. Everybody's gonna watch every day now in hopes that the tariff decision will come out. You know, you talk to 3 people, you get 4 different opinions as to what the likely outcome of that case is, but it is one certainly worth watching. It could have enormous consequences, and it was interesting to hear what you and I were just talking about is the news that has come out is that the administration is saying that they do think that even if they lose the case, that they'll be able to pivot very quickly with other authorities and other statutes to maybe recreate not the exact same plan or program, but that it will be of the same sort and magnitude and same result. So we'll see what happens.
That's very well said. And actually, the Congress has done some really miraculous things about 40 years ago with legislation that is what the foundation is focused on, and that through the International Trade Commission. And what Congress has legislated is that through the ITC, the International Trade Commission, we can get into the, if you excuse the expression, the guts of foreign factories through legal discovery, find out exactly what their manufacturing processes are, because these laws do not focus on products. They focus on the manufacturing process of products that are imported into the US. And China has boasted that they have 30,000 factories that use AI technology. My patent claims cover manufacturing processes. Therefore, it's not the products that are infringing, it is the manufacturing process that would be infringing, and that covers far more than just a type of product or a feature in a product.
I suppose I hadn't really thought about that. I guess I have always known that to be true in some respects. When you get a patent on something, if people can make it any different than what your patent claims cover, now they're outside the patent. But with the process patents, if they're using the same process, they'll wind up making it a little bit different. Well, then they'd still be infringing. And there's always been that part of the law. But I do get a sense, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to articulate it here quickly on the fly, but I get a sense that in the AI world, it's even a degree different and maybe not even maybe a logarithmic level different because the AI is the backbone that enables the manufacturing. And I think the AI is a bunch of tools and solutions that wind up getting employed, rinse, repeat over and over again, regardless of what is the output of the factory at any given moment or any given part of the day. And that could make these patents and similar AI manufacturing process patents extremely valuable.
Extremely so. For example, to put some hypothetical numbers, metaphorically speaking, because there are 30,000 factories in China using AI technology, and because the pending patent claims cover AI manufacturing processes, 30,000 factories might be generating 100,000 different types of products. All products manufactured with an infringing process are infringing when imported. That's specifically what the Congress legislated.
Right.
And they were very far looking, and they knew they essentially have predicted the dilemma that we're in today. And therefore, that specific legislation is very powerful in conjunction with process claims that are focused on manufacturing processes, not products.
This could be a big moment in time, and I suppose it could happen, and maybe you could fill us in on this, but it sounds like this could happen, uh, even if the Supreme Court rules in favor of what President Trump had done on tariffs. It would just be another layer in the trade aspects of what President Trump is trying to do in terms of balancing trade and making him a more fair playing field in the first instance, and then also having Americans assert some level of dominance, not only with AI, but maybe also with manufacturing or high tech manufacturing of some sorts. Even if the Supreme Court does rule in President Trump's favor, this is still something that could go forward and still be beneficial, right?
That's a brilliant observation because the International Trade Commission is completely separate from the tariff issues that are before the Supreme Court and that were turned off at the Federal Circuit just before the Supreme Court proceeding. So the president can use both tariffs and the International Trade Commission, which has to do with domestic industry, not with tariffs and exclusion orders. And the International Trade Commission generates what they call general exclusion orders, which can exclude multitudes of different products that are infringing on American patents. So, but this is very unique in that these laws permit American process patents to get into the, use the expression again, the guts of the foreign factories and the products manufactured by infringing processes in foreign factories become infringing products when they are imported into the US, regardless of what the product is. It's how they were manufactured. Isn't that amazing?
It is. It'll be interesting to see this play. I think that, there's more chapters of this book yet to be written. And I think it's going to get a lot more interesting before it gets any less interesting. And, I was hearing today as a part of the economic news is that the economy is starting to grow very fast. I think we're going to see more from the administration. This would be a piece of that. I think there'll be other pieces. I think eventually later on this year, we'll see the Fed continue to reduce interest rates, which I think will have an effect, a positive effect on the economy, certainly a positive effect on affordability, certainly with respect to home prices. So I think what we're starting to see unfold before our eyes is this multifaceted attack by the Trump administration on a whole bunch of issues that will have a long-term positive effect for the US economy. And I'm excited to see what part that patents and in particular AI patents play in that equation.
That's absolutely correct. But we are at the in our past work for a couple of decades, and now in the we're putting it into the foundation is our work for education. Particularly, we believe that education of young children, preschool children, using AI and what I've classified as the AI friend, working with the children on a one-to-one basis to educate them both in STEM education, STEM is the acronym, and in innovation. We've done a lot of work in innovation and teaching young children innovation. Therefore, what I'm expecting is to see that the intelligence level of the next generation being quite significantly better and being very innovative.
The brain is a muscle. The more you use it, the smarter you seem to be. And I do think that encouraging people at a young age, kids, to open their eyes and see possibilities and dream and realize that they can create themselves. And it makes it real in a different way. And anytime you can make something real and help people internalize it into their own existence, into their own lives, I think it has more meaning. So I'm a big fan of educating. I think, and I know we've kind of said some negative things about the patent office here today. One of the things I think the patent office does really well is they encourage that aspect. You Camp Invent, where you have a lot of the Hall of Fame inventors, living Hall of Fame inventors participate and try and encourage some of the best and brightest youngsters that go to that camp to innovate and to invent, and what is a patent and how do you use it. They learn about science and engineering and law a little bit as well. I think that only good things can come of that.
The best way to what we're doing is working with children on a one-to-one basis. And it's very tedious for a human to work with a child when there are a lot of children around. But but with AI, we have a concept of the AI friend, and AI can be and is currently being done for searching. It is a one-on-one type of process, and that face-to-face, essentially, with maybe an AI avatar and a child, is very, very helpful in teaching children because kids are very receptive to having a friend work with them. And then education becomes a game, not a hardship
Right.
for the little kids.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I think probably tedious wasn't the right way to describe it as much as it is. It's just an impossibility to work with so many children one on one as an individual because we have bandwidth limits and teacher limits. But with AI, there is no bandwidth limit and it never seems to get tired. It doesn't need to take a break for sleep. It doesn't need to take a break for food or water. And it can be everywhere and it can, done properly. I think it could be something that would really be encouraging to kids. I know there's been some high profile examples of AI being maybe the opposite of that to children who were suffering from depression or maybe were suicidal. And I don't think that has to be the state of AI. I think AI can be a force for good. And I look forward to that happening more and more.
You're absolutely right, but it's not can be, it is because I use, for instance, Chat GPT extensively, and I find that looking at it objectively, it is not a search engine. It is a friend,
Mhm,
and it's a friend that's helping me,
mhm.
and it really does help me. I think that we're already there. It's just a matter of adapting what we already have to the preschool generation and giving them the one-on-one AI friend concept to work with them.
Mhm. Fascinating stuff. Well, I really appreciate you being here and to have this conversation with me. I think it was fascinating. Hopefully, we'll have you come back when the foundation does get off the ground. You can come back and give us an update about that. I look forward to that. But thank you, Gil.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you for listening to IP Watchdog Unleashed. We will be back next week and we hope you will join us again. In the meantime, please be sure to visit IPWatchdog.com to read all the latest news and information about what is happening in the intellectual property world. And also be sure to subscribe to our free daily email newsletter.